For 10 years, I built my life around Emily. She wasn't just my wife, she was my best friend, my safe place, my reason for pushing forward when things got tough. I adored her, truly. It wasn't just love, it was admiration. She was kind, intelligent, and effortlessly beautiful, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make it brighter just by being there. We had our little traditions: Sunday morning pancakes, late-night talks on the back porch, spontaneous road trips just because. Every part of my life was intertwined with hers, and I never questioned for a second that she felt the same way about me. Until that one day. It was a warm afternoon, the kind where the sun filters through the trees just right, making everything feel golden. I had just finished grabbing a few things from the hardware store. Emily had been talking about fixing up the backyard, and I wanted to surprise her with a new patio set. Something small, but thoughtful. That's the kind of husband I tried to be. As I turned onto our street, I saw her car parked about 3 houses down from ours. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was dropping something off for a neighbor. Maybe she was on the phone and didn't want to pull into the driveway yet. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. She was sitting completely still in the driver's seat, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. Her posture was stiff, tense, as if she had been caught in the middle of something. Her expression was unreadable, like she was deep in thought, struggling with something inside her own head. I pulled up next to her and rolled down my window, smiling. "Hey, Em, you okay?" She jumped slightly, her eyes wide as if she hadn't noticed me until that moment. Then, too quickly, she smiled. It was forced. I had known her long enough to recognize when something was off. Yeah, I'm fine," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Just thinking." I frowned. Thinking about what? She hesitated, glancing down at her lap. That's when I saw it, her phone, screen glowing with a text message. She shifted, blocking it from my view, but not before I caught a glimpse of a name I didn't recognize. Something tightened in my chest. "Want to head inside?" I asked casually, pretending not to notice her sudden nervousness. "Yeah, of course," she said quickly, finally shoving the phone into her purse. I didn't say anything else. I followed her into the house, but in that moment, a small crack formed in the perfect image I had of our marriage. I didn't know it yet, but that crack was about to shatter everything. That night, Emily was quiet, distant. She smiled at the right moments, laughed when she was supposed to, but it felt mechanical, like she was playing a part. I tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the unease settled deep in my gut. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get. And I had no idea that the moment I saw her sitting in that car was just the beginning of the worst heartbreak of my life. That night, as Emily lay beside me in bed, I could feel the distance between us like a physical barrier. It wasn't just that she was quiet. Emily had always been the type to retreat into her thoughts when something was on her mind. But this was different. Her body was there, next to mine, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She had always been affectionate, the kind of woman who would unconsciously reach for my hand even in her sleep, or shift closer to me when the night air turned cool. But tonight, she stayed still, rigid. And when I brushed my fingers against hers, she flinched. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was stressed from work. Maybe something was bothering her that she wasn't ready to talk about. It wasn't fair to assume the worst just because she was acting a little off, right? Still, sleep didn't come easy that night. My mind kept replaying that moment in the car, her tense grip on the wheel, the flicker of panic in her eyes, the way she had hidden her phone from my view. I woke up before sunrise, feeling restless. Emily was still asleep, her face turned away from me. Quietly, I got up, grabbed my phone, and stepped out onto the back porch. The sky was just starting to lighten, the world still wrapped in that early morning stillness. I stared at my phone for a long time, debating with myself. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I opened our cell phone account. It wasn't something I had ever done before. I had never felt the need to. Emily and I had always trusted each other completely. But that feeling in my gut wouldn't let me rest. As I scrolled through the list of outgoing calls and messages, I noticed something that made my breath hitch. The same unknown number several times a day for the past 2 weeks. Late at night, early in the morning, even in the middle of the workday, and always for long durations. My stomach twisted. I clicked on the number and copied it into a search bar. No name came up, just a blank screen. I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. Maybe it was a work colleague. Maybe a friend I didn't know about. But something deep inside me knew better. When I walked back into the bedroom, Emily was still curled up in bed, unaware that I had just opened a door I couldn't close. I didn't confront her right away. I needed more than just a gut feeling and a phone number before I jumped to conclusions. So I waited. I watched. And I started paying attention to things I had never questioned before. And that's when I noticed it. Her habits had changed. She was texting more, but never around me. If I walked into the room while she was on her phone, she would lock the screen immediately, as if by instinct. She had started leaving the house without telling me where she was going, quick trips, random errands that she had never mentioned before. The biggest sign came a few days later, when she got home late from work. She had told me she was stuck in meetings all day, that she was exhausted. But when she walked in, she didn't look exhausted, she looked nervous. As if she was expecting something. Or someone. She set her purse down on the counter and gave me a tight smile. Long day? I asked, forcing my voice to stay casual. The worst, she sighed, rubbing her forehead. Back-to-back meetings. I barely had time to eat. That was the moment I decided to test something. Yeah, I asked. What did you have for lunch? It was a simple question. One she normally wouldn't think twice about answering. But for the briefest second, I saw her hesitate. Oh, just a salad, she said quickly. I grabbed something from the cafe near work. A harmless answer. Except there was no cafe near her office. I knew because I had worked just a few blocks away for years. And Emily hated salads. Something inside me twisted. I forced a smile, nodding as if I believed her. But I didn't. That night, when she was asleep, I took her phone. I had never done anything like that before, and my hands were shaking as I held it. Her password hadn't changed, and when I unlocked it, I told myself I was just checking for messages from that unknown number. But what I found was worse. So much worse. There were no messages at all. None. As if she had deleted them all. And that was when I knew. This wasn't just paranoia. This wasn't just me overthinking things. Something was happening. And Emily was hiding it. I put the phone back where I found it and lay back down beside her, staring at the ceiling. The woman I adored, the woman I had built my entire life around, was keeping secrets from me. And I had no idea how deep they went. Lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt like I was suffocating. My mind was racing, cycling through every possibility, every excuse I wanted to believe. But deep down, I knew the truth, something was terribly wrong. Emily was hiding something from me. And not just something small. Something big. Something she was willing to go to great lengths to cover up. I told myself I needed more proof before I confronted her. Maybe there was an explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe, just maybe, I was being paranoid. But the way my stomach twisted every time I thought about that empty message folder told me otherwise. The next morning, I decided to pay attention to every detail. Emily woke up before I did, which wasn't normal. She was always the one to hit snooze 3 times before dragging herself out of bed, complaining about needing coffee before she could function. But today, she was up early, already dressed, standing by the mirror fixing her hair when I finally sat up. Wow, I said, trying to sound casual. You're up early. She turned, startled, as if she hadn't noticed me. Then she forced a smile. Yeah, I have a big presentation at work today. I wanted to get in early and prepare. A perfectly reasonable answer. But then I noticed something strange. She had done her makeup a little differently. It was subtle, but I knew her too well. Her lipstick was a shade darker than what she usually wore to the office. And she had curled her hair, something she only ever did for special occasions. And then there was her perfume. It was stronger than usual, like she had put on an extra layer. Something about all of it felt deliberate. I forced myself to act normal. I kissed her goodbye, told her good luck with the presentation, and watched as she hurried out the door. Then, without thinking, I grabbed my phone and opened our shared location app. We had set it up years ago, mostly for convenience. If one of us was running late or lost, we could check each other's location. It wasn't something I had ever felt the need to use before. But today, I checked. I watched as her little dot moved down the street, then turned, then kept going, past her office. My pulse quickened. I kept refreshing the map, my stomach tightening with every passing second. 10 minutes later, she stopped. At a hotel. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was meeting a client. Maybe she was just stopping for coffee at the cafe in the lobby. But then I remembered, there was no cafe in that hotel. I sat there for a long time, just staring at my phone, my hands shaking. Then I made a decision. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed my keys, threw on some clothes, and left the house without another thought. The hotel. The drive felt like a blur. My mind was spinning, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept glancing at the map, watching her location, making sure she hadn't moved. She hadn't. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breath. What was I doing? What was I expecting to see? I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat as I scanned the cars parked outside. And then, I saw it. Her car, parked near the entrance. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at it, my mind trying to come up with any logical explanation. Maybe she was meeting a friend. Maybe. But I knew better. I got out of my car and walked toward the entrance, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs were going to crack. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to know. The lobby was quiet, dimly lit, the kind of place that catered to discretion. My stomach twisted. I approached the front desk, forcing my voice to stay steady. Hi, I'm meeting my wife here, but I forgot which room she booked. Emily Turner. The receptionist barely glanced up. Sorry, sir, we can't give out guest information. Of course. I nodded, forcing a polite smile. Right. Thanks. I turned away, feeling my pulse in my fingertips. Then, as I stepped back toward the entrance, I saw her. Emily, stepping out of the elevator. And she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, laughing at something she had said. He was tall, well-dressed, with an easy confidence about him. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. My stomach dropped. I had spent the last 10 years memorizing every little thing about this woman. I knew how she laughed, how she smiled, how she moved. And I could tell, this wasn't just a business meeting. This was intimacy. Something inside me shattered. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. I just turned and walked out. By the time I got back to my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at nothing, my mind racing. What now? What do you do when the person you've loved most in the world betrays you? I had no answers. All I knew was that the life I had built with Emily, the trust, the love, the memories, had just been destroyed. And I had no idea what came next. I don't remember driving home. My hands were on the wheel, my foot on the gas, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, stuck in a loop, replaying that moment over and over again. Emily, that man, the way she had smiled at him, touched his arm so effortlessly, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The moment I stepped inside our house, I felt like a stranger. The walls, the pictures of us together, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air, everything felt tainted now. Like I was living in someone else's life, walking through the ruins of a love I had been foolish enough to believe was real. I collapsed onto the couch, my heart pounding in my ears. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Demand answers? What would that even accomplish? She had already given me my answer, loud and clear. I wasn't enough for her anymore. I should have been angry, furious. But all I felt was empty. For 10 years, I had given her everything. I had built my life around her, trusted her completely. And now, all of that was meaningless. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. A text from Emily. Emily, hey babe, long day. I'm exhausted. Gonna take a shower and head to bed early. Love you. Love you. The words felt like a slap in the face. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to type something, anything. I wanted to tell her I knew, that I had seen her, that everything was over. But I didn't. Instead, I locked my phone and sat there in silence. She was lying to me. Again. Right to my face, without hesitation. And that hurt more than anything else. The waiting game. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him. The way she looked at him. The way she touched him. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I had made a decision. I needed more than just what I saw in the hotel lobby. If I was going to confront her, I wanted undeniable proof. I wanted to know how long this had been going on, how deep the lies went. So I waited. That morning, Emily acted completely normal. She kissed me goodbye, smiled like nothing had changed, and walked out the door with the same ease she always had. And for the first time in my life, I watched her go without feeling that familiar warmth in my chest. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Cold. I grabbed my laptop, opened her iCloud account, something she had forgotten to log out of on our shared computer months ago, and held my breath. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But then I saw the deleted messages. My hands trembled as I clicked through them, one by one. And what I found made my stomach turn. Emily, I can't stop thinking about last night. You're driving me crazy. Unknown number. You're the one who's driving me crazy. When can I see you again? Emily, Friday. Same hotel. Unknown number. You know it. Can't wait. Friday. That was yesterday. I scrolled further. More messages. More secrets. Conversations filled with inside jokes, hidden meanings, things I had never been a part of. She had been seeing him for months. While I was at work, thinking about our future, planning for us, she had been sneaking around behind my back, meeting him in hotels, lying to my face without a second thought. I clenched my jaw, trying to push back the burning in my chest. I wasn't just losing my wife. I had already lost her. The test. I needed to know more. If I confronted her now, she would lie. I knew she would. She was too deep into this now, too comfortable with deception. So instead, I decided to set a trap. That afternoon, I sent her a message. Me. Hey babe, thinking about surprising you with dinner tonight. What time will you be home? It took her a while to reply. Emily, that's sweet. But I have to work late tonight. Maybe tomorrow. Lies. I knew exactly where she would be. I played along. Me. No worries. Love you. Emily. Love you too. I felt sick. That evening, I waited until she left. Then, I followed her. She didn't go to work. She drove straight to the same hotel. I stayed in my car, watching from a distance as she parked, checked her reflection in the mirror, and stepped out. She smoothed out her dress, fixed her hair, and walked inside like she had done it 100 times before. I felt like I was going to be sick. For a long time, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had my answer. But now, I had to decide what to do with it. The beginning of the end. I didn't storm in after her. I didn't demand answers. Instead, I drove home. I needed time to think. By the time Emily walked through the door later that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in front of me. She froze when she saw me. You're up late. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger. I couldn't sleep, I said evenly. She hesitated. Then she walked over, leaned down, and kissed my forehead. And just like that, I knew. She didn't suspect a thing. She had no idea that I knew. And that meant I had all the power. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something close to control. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not yet. I needed a plan. And when the time was right, she was going to learn exactly what it felt like to have her world fall apart. For the first time in my marriage, I was keeping a secret from Emily. I knew everything. The hotel, the messages, the lies she had woven so effortlessly into our everyday life. And yet, she had no idea that I had seen it all. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, my mind was racing. She slept peacefully, her breath slow and steady, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at a stranger. I had two choices. I could confront her now, demand the truth, force her to admit to what she had done. Or I could play the long game, gather more information, control the narrative. I chose the latter. If Emily wanted to keep secrets from me, I would do the same. Observing the enemy. The next morning, I watched her closely. Every movement, every glance at her phone, every small hesitation in her voice. Now that I knew the truth, the signs were obvious. She spent extra time getting ready, even though it was just another workday. She lingered by the mirror, adjusting her hair, checking her reflection with a look I recognized all too well. It was the look of a woman who wanted to impress someone. And it wasn't me. Big day at work? I asked casually over breakfast. She barely looked up from her coffee. Just meetings. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. She kissed me goodbye, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door like nothing was wrong. I waited a full 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and following her. The pursuit. Emily's office was downtown, but as I suspected, she didn't drive there. Instead, she took a different route, one that led straight to a small cafe on the other side of town. I parked down the street and watched as she stepped inside. 2 minutes later, he arrived. The man from the hotel. Tall, well-dressed, confident. He walked inside like he belonged there, like this was routine. And judging by the way Emily's face lit up when she saw him, it was. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. She was cheating on me. In broad daylight. Without a care in the world. I could have walked inside right then and there. Confronted her in the middle of the cafe, made a scene, exposed her for what she was. But that wasn't the plan. Instead, I took out my phone and started recording. gathering evidence. I didn't just want proof. I wanted undeniable, irrefutable evidence. The kind she couldn't talk her way out of. So I sat there and watched. They laughed, touched hands across the table. She leaned in when he spoke, her eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. It felt like someone had taken a knife and driven it straight through my chest. I wasn't just losing my wife. I had already lost her. They left the cafe together, got into his car, drove away. I followed. It was a quiet drive, straight back to the same hotel. I parked across the street and watched as they walked inside. Her hand brushed against his. His arm rested casually on her back. And just like that, they disappeared into the building. I sat there for an hour. 2. I don't know how long, really. At some point, I realized my hands were shaking. Not with rage. Not even with sadness. But with clarity. This was it. The moment my marriage ended. Emily just didn't know it yet. The trap. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I made a stop. A lawyer's office. I had never imagined a day where I would need one. Divorce had never been something I considered. But now, I wasn't going to be the fool in this story. I explained everything. The messages, the hotel, the photos I had taken. My lawyer listened carefully, then leaned forward, hands clasped. You have enough to bury her in court, he said. Good. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted control. And I was going to get it. Playing the game. That evening, when Emily came home, she acted normal. Like she hadn't just spent the afternoon betraying me. Hey, babe, she said, kissing my cheek. How was your day? I forced a smile. Same old, same old. She laughed, running a hand through her hair. I swear, my meetings are getting worse every day. Just nonstop talking, and for what? Lies. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No love. No anger. Just cold, calculated detachment. I was going to end this on my terms. And when I was done, Emily was going to realize that the man she had been lying to wasn't as blind as she thought. I sat across from her at dinner, watching the way she smiled, the way she sipped her wine, the way she asked about my day like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just spent the afternoon with another man. It was almost impressive how effortlessly she lied. If I didn't know any better, I might have believed her. But I did know better. And now, every fake smile, every affectionate touch, every little inside joke she threw my way felt like a carefully rehearsed performance. I played along. I laughed at the right moments. I nodded when she spoke. I even kissed her goodnight, just like I always had. But inside, I was counting down the days until I burned her world to the ground. The next morning, I acted normal. I kissed her goodbye, told her to have a great day, and watched her walk out the door with a smile. The second she was gone, I got to work. My first stop was the bank. I had always been smart with money. Emily and I had a joint account, but I also had my own personal savings, tucked away just in case. I moved a large portion of our shared funds into that account. Legally, I was allowed to. My lawyer had already confirmed that much. I wasn't stealing. I was protecting myself. Then, I went home and packed a bag. Just a small one. Enough to last me a few days. I had no intention of sticking around once the truth came out. By noon, I was sitting in my car outside the same hotel, waiting. Sure enough, Emily showed up. She parked in the same spot, checked her reflection in the mirror, and walked inside without hesitation. No guilt. No hesitation. Just routine. Not even 15 minutes later, her lover arrived. I pulled out my phone and started recording. It didn't take long. A few minutes later, they came out together, laughing, his hand grazing the small of her back. She looked up at him the way she used to look at me, like he was the only person in the world. That was the moment I realized something. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and hit send. A mass text. To Emily. To her parents. To her siblings. To all of our mutual friends. One simple message attached to a video of her and her lover walking into the hotel. I thought you all should see this before I file for divorce. Emily, you can keep your secrets. I'm done. I put my phone down, turned on the car, and drove away without looking back. I didn't need to see her reaction. I already knew exactly how this story was going to end. I didn't turn my phone on for hours. I didn't need to. I knew what was happening on the other end. Knew the moment my message went out, Emily's carefully constructed world had crumbled. The calls, the frantic messages, the excuses, I could picture it all. And I didn't care. For years, I had been the devoted husband. The man who put his wife first, who worked hard to build a life with her, who believed in love and trust and commitment. I had been the fool who thought we were on the same team. Not anymore. I had driven straight to a hotel on the other side of town, checked in, and locked the door behind me. I wasn't going back to that house. Not now. Maybe not ever. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. But the thing was, I didn't feel the overwhelming pain I had expected. I wasn't broken. I wasn't curled up in a ball, sobbing into my hands, questioning where I went wrong. No. I felt free. My phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. But after the fourth, fifth, sixth call, I finally picked it up and turned it on. The messages flooded in immediately. Emily, please, call me. I can explain. Emily, why would you do this? Can we just talk? Emily, I didn't want you to find out like this. But we can fix this. I know we can. Fix this? I let out a bitter laugh. There was nothing left to fix. More messages. Some from her family. Some from mine. Friends I hadn't heard from in months, suddenly rushing in to pick sides. Then, another message. From an unknown number. I frowned and opened it. Unknown number, you have no idea what you've done. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Then another message came in. Unknown number, meet me. Tonight. We need to talk. I exhaled slowly. I didn't need to guess who it was. The other man. Emily's lover. And for some reason, he wanted to talk to me. I wasn't sure if I was going to go. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Block the number. Let him and Emily clean up the mess they had made. But another part of me, the part that needed to know the full truth, wanted answers. So I sent one word back. Where? A few minutes later, the reply came. A bar on the edge of town. Neutral ground. Fine. I didn't have anything to lose anymore. The bar was dimly lit, crowded but quiet. The kind of place where people went to drink away their problems, not start new ones. I spotted him immediately. He was already at a table in the back, a drink in front of him, watching the door like he had been waiting. I walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down without a word. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I had expected a smirk, some cocky attitude, but he looked tense, almost nervous. Finally, he spoke. I didn't know she was married. I raised an eyebrow. Try again. His jaw tightened. I swear to you, man. I met her at a conference. She told me she was divorced. I let that sink in. Emily had lied to him too. That should have surprised me. It didn't. Doesn't really change anything, does it? I said, leaning back in my chair. You still slept with my wife. He exhaled sharply. I didn't know. I swear. And when I found out, she told me you two were just living together for financial reasons. That it was already over. My stomach twisted. I shouldn't have been surprised. Emily had always been good at rewriting the truth, twisting things in her favor. And clearly, she had been doing it long before I ever caught on. I looked at the man across from me, really looked at him. And for the first time, I saw it. He wasn't some villain who had come into my life to steal my wife away. He had been played too. He ran a hand through his hair. She called me after your message went out, screaming at me, saying I ruined her life, that it was all my fault. I smirked. Sounds familiar. He shook his head. I should have known something was off. She was always hiding her phone, always making excuses. But I was stupid. I believed her. I studied him for a long moment. Then, finally, I nodded. Yeah, I said. So did I. When I left the bar that night, I wasn't thinking about Emily. I wasn't thinking about revenge, or what came next, or how much of my life had just been thrown away. I was thinking about something far more important. I had finally gotten my answer. Emily hadn't just betrayed me. She had built an entire world of lies around herself, weaving one deception into another, covering her tracks until even the people closest to her couldn't tell what was real anymore. But now she had been exposed. And for the first time in a long, long time, she wasn't in control anymore. I didn't go back to Emily. Not that night. Not ever. Instead, I went back to my hotel room, sat on the bed, and took a long, deep breath. For the first time in weeks, maybe even months, the weight on my chest didn't feel as crushing. I had walked away from that bar with something I didn't realize I needed: closure. Emily had built a house of lies, thinking she could live in it forever. But lies have a way of crumbling, and now she was buried under the wreckage of her own making. It wasn't my job to dig her out. She was on her own now. I woke up the next morning feeling different. Lighter. Not happy, not yet, but free. My lawyer had already drawn up the divorce papers. Now, all that was left was to make it official. I took my time that morning, drinking my coffee on the hotel balcony, letting the fresh air fill my lungs. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing. I wasn't checking my phone, waiting for messages, worrying about where she was or what she was doing. I was done. I met Emily at a small cafe later that afternoon to hand her the papers. She looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy, like she had been crying. Her hair wasn't styled, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices. She sat down across from me, staring at the stack of papers like they might burst into flames. "So that's it," she whispered. I nodded. "Yeah, that's it." Her lower lip trembled. "You're really just walking away?" I tilted my head, studying her. "What did you expect, Emily? That we'd talk it out? That I'd forgive you?" I let out a short laugh. "You didn't just cheat. You lied. Over and over again. And the worst part? You only care because you got caught." She swallowed hard, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You meant everything to me," she whispered. I met her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Then you should have treated me like it." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back before she could touch me. She wasn't my wife anymore. Not really. She was just another mistake I was leaving behind. I pushed the papers toward her. Signed them. For a moment, I thought she would fight it. Try to make excuses. Beg for another chance. But then, after what felt like an eternity, she picked up the pen and signed her name. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of that cafe without looking back. And as I stepped onto the sidewalk, feeling the sun on my face, I smiled for the first time in a long time. I wasn't broken. I wasn't ruined. I was free. And my new life was just beginning.